Okay, so for anyone listening to this who might be new, welcome. If you're interested in getting a reading like this, you can check out my website for more information. That's manic.mercurian.net, or you can email me manic.mercurian@gmail.com. But yeah, I do want to give my thanks for all of you who have gotten readings, just because this is sort of what allows me to, invest my time into creating content for the channel and, investing into astrology in general. So I really do appreciate it. Okay, so this reading will be for Monday, November 11th, 1968 at 2:10 p.m. in Salt Lake City, Utah. So this means you have Sun in Scorpio, Moon in Leo with Pisces rising. And I think right off the bat for, if we're anyone familiar with the 12 signs would know that right off the bat, Scorpio Sun, Leo Moon, Pisces rising, there's going to be a lot of emotion, a lot of passion in this person for sure. First, let's just talk about your sun sign. So Scorpio Sun tends to be very emotionally intense. And I think with all that really heavy emotion comes a lot of vulnerability. So typically Scorpio is the scorpion. It has a hard exoskeleton to protect its soft insides. So typically Scorpio will have a front that's, either acting tough, like don't mess with me, or I think in this case, though, I think it's more of a projecting a very strong outer personality, like everything's always fine with me type of thing. Does that make sense? So I think, for a chart like this, I think you would be perceived as very strong, very confident, and this is strengthened by the Leo moon as well. Both of these placements show someone who, feels it's important to project a strong, confident image at all times, not only for themselves but also for other people. We always have to be strong for others, and be energetic and kind of sunshiny. That way, does that make sense? Or like kind of what I'm trying to get at is, I think with a chart like this, almost everyone would not know that you sometimes have challenges or struggles. You would keep that, very private to yourself while continuing to project this very strong, confident image, if that makes sense. Let's see, what else can we talk about here? Scorpio tends to be very ambitious and a little bit pessimistic. Scorpio Sun people tend to view the glass half empty, and that's not entirely a bad thing. This is part of what allows them to be so ambitious, because they're always looking for something to fix, something to improve on. They're looking for the next project to work on, and so they can be extremely constructive and productive. Also, adding in the Leo moon to this adds a lot of fire, passion, confidence, enthusiasm, a lot of energy. So, for this person, I think you would be extremely ambitious. You don't just project an image of confidence and productivity. You truly live up to that, and I would speculate you'd accomplish a lot. What else can we talk about here? Also very fiery, very passionate. These are things that come with the Leo moon, but these things come with the Scorpio sun as well. I always say that Scorpio, for a water sign, it's actually very fiery. We can definitely see the water element in the high amount of emotion that comes with that placement, but Scorpios are very fiery as well. They're very passionate, very energetic, very kind of fierce. So, this is also strengthened by the Leo moon as well. So here you have a very passionate, very kind of fiery, very charismatic individual. One theme that I see in this chart that is, how do I put this? It's like a double-sided theme, has to do with how for your chart, you may be simultaneously very much in the group, very popular, charismatic, very much, well received by others, especially in your work and in public, which we're going to talk more about that later. But it just in general too, I think you'd be a very well received personality. But on the other hand, you can also sometimes throughout your life feel very misunderstood, very estranged, and, not part of the group at all, more on the fringe. There's this kind of juxtaposition of both extremes, sometimes simultaneously, or you may oscillate between one and the other throughout your life. But this just comes with combining Scorpio with Leo, as well as some of your other placements as well. Um, you know, well, I guess by that I just mean, having such strong Scorpio energy tends to be like counterculture energy. It tends to be, the other. It's a very it's viewed as a weird energy. So people with strong Scorpio like yourself would be, that would be more on the being on the fringe, being different than what others are used to. But having the Leo moon, that would be a placement that's very easily received. Others would just understand you very well. So that's where I say it's kind of both at the same time, even though those are completely opposite experiences. Part of this too, again, goes back to that front. Others don't truly understand you. I think you may be very polarizing for people. In other words, like, people tend to find you, they're either in love with you or they hate you. It's very rare for people to be bored by you or passive. You tend to draw out these really strong opinions. But what's interesting, again, is that as strong as people may feel about you, most of them aren't truly understanding you. They're only seeing that front that you are putting up, so to speak. And this may not be something that you are even intentionally doing, but I would speculate it's more of a subconscious part of yourself that you kind of put up as a barrier in a way. But this part of yourself, it can be very engaging. There's a depth to that will satisfy people. You can have long-lasting relationships with people that only know this shallower side of you. But underneath that, there are many layers, and we're going to talk more about that in a bit as well. Let's talk about your charisma, though. So with Scorpio Sun, Leo Moon, well, right off the bat, Scorpio Sun, this indicates that you're very excellent with understanding other people and seeing or sensing others' feelings, thoughts, motives, etc. Leo Moon adds this like gregariousness and element of fun, very fun-loving personality, very upbeat and kind of jovial. So combining these two things makes you very excellent with knowing your audience and kind of playing within that. Also, Pisces rising is a very charismatic placement, because this means that when people first meet you, you come across as very non-threatening. People are not very intimidated by you, generally speaking. They find it easy to warm up to you relatively quickly, of course, generally speaking. And with Pisces rising too, people of all walks of life can kind of connect with you pretty easily. That's one of the more charismatic and kind of friendly ascendants to have. So in other words, that placement means that you are easy to meet, easy to get to know, to some extent. Okay, and then one thing that I'm going to talk about more later as well is that Venus, close to the midheaven in the 10th house, all in Sagittarius, that indicates that you have a really strong reputation, really strong potential with your career. We're going to talk more about that in the career section, but you come across as very friendly and upbeat in your work and in public. So others love your energy. They love your presence. They find it easy to be around you. And this will be something that will be rewarding for you, not just because it's, I think it would look like a very fun experience to have, very rewarding. You could have some really interesting relationships and experiences through this energy. But also, this is lucrative. This is profitable. You could be, I don't know, it looks like you'd have a very entertaining personality at work. So all in all, when you kind of step back from it all, it looks like a very strong personality for sure. Someone who probably has very strong relationships. That reminds me of something I almost forgot to say. So something I would speculate about, because you have Scorpio Sun and Mercury and Leo Moon, these suggest to me that you take your relationships very seriously. These placements are very loyal. So you would be fiercely loyal and maybe even a little bit possessive, which is not a bad thing. If you make a friend or if you have a family member, that person is something that there's someone that you would die for. You would defend this person. You would fight for them, to the death if that's what it takes, and you expect some of that in return as well. So, I think all this comes from having such strong emotions and strong passion it means that you can't afford to invest in someone that doesn't have your back, or who isn't loyal to you. So friendships, family relationships as well, are all things that I would speculate you would take extremely seriously. Let's see, what else did I want to say about that? I guess just that, really. And these are just things that are supported by Scorpio energy as well as Leo too. Both of these are fixed signs, so they mean that you may be a bit possessive because you want consistency. If someone's your friend or family member, whatever relationship you have with someone, you want that to continue as long as possible. You want to really invest in things in general. You want to find the constants in life, because part of having this strong Scorpio energy means that you're always looking for structure. Or in other words, I could say having such strong emotion means that you're always looking for structure. What can I count on? Because much of what you're doing in life is avoiding the kind of emotional turmoil that you can so frequently fall into. And I say all this, and I think for someone who knows this person, it may seem unusual or surprising, because again, I don't think you would really sense any of this with this person. This person presents an image of being fine all the time, of being strong all the time, and they are strong, but anyway, so what else can I talk about? Okay, something interesting that I noticed earlier is, okay, having Scorpio sun with Leo moon, this typically would be a person who's very fierce, like I was saying earlier, very passionate, kind of ready to fight. This is a fighter. But if you look to where Mars is, Mars represents our fighting stance, how we fight for something, what we fight for. Mars is in Libra, where it's in detriment. So this suggests a person that doesn't want to fight. This is a peace-loving person. It's more of a lover than a fighter. So I think this is a little bit, I almost said misleading, I don't know if that's the right word, but it may catch people off guard, because I think this would indicate that this person comes across as more fierce or ready to fight than they actually are. There may definitely be some fighting ability, like I was saying just a moment ago. I think especially for defending a loved one, I think that would definitely be something that this person could do. But other than that, just for fighting in general, this person would avoid confrontation. They don't like conflict. Conflict would stress them out a lot, and they would get out of a confrontational situation either mostly through their mind, through thinking their way out of it, talking their way out of it, through the mental energy. Mars in Libra is in detriment, so this is a debilitated placement. It's challenged. So this means this person actually doesn't thrive with confrontation, which again is very unusual, considering most of the personality has to do with Scorpio and Leo themes. So, it becomes difficult for a reader to express these things, but I'm doing the best I can. Basically, the way I see it is, like I said earlier, this person seems like they're a fighter, and in many ways they are, but at the same time, they don't want to fight. They want peace. If anything, maybe they'll fight for peace, that kind of thing. Also with Mars and Libra, typically this means that in crisis, critical situations, this person would not panic. And if anything, they would actually become much more logical, thinking everything through, thinking very quickly. And again, they would think their way out of a situation. So this would be a good person to have in a intense situation for sure, especially when you combine the loyalty with the ability to think in an extremely rational way. The more pressure you put on this person, the more mentally oriented they get, the more analytical they would get. So I find that interesting too. I think that's something that meeting this person you may not expect, really. Okay, and let me just kind of look around the chart. I think I've covered a pretty decent amount just for the kind of general personality, general themes. So let's get into the more, categorized parts of the reading here. Okay, so we're going to talk about upbringing, past life themes, upbringing, childhood, and then also major challenges in the life. So this is by far the heaviest part of the reading for sure. I like to lay it on thick kind of at the beginning, and then we get a little bit lighter as we go forward. So let's see, where can we go first? Let's talk about past life themes because everyone seems to love hearing that part. So for this, I really look to one placement. That's usually the extent of my knowledge. So this would be South Node in Libra in this case. We know South Node is at 8 degrees Libra because the North Node is at 8 degrees Aries, and they're always exactly opposite. So with South Node in Libra, this suggests a person in a past life or multiple other lives. You likely had a life where you did not fully exercise your free will. You were fully occupied by someone else's needs, someone else's desires. So that could play out in multiple different ways. You could have been someone who was, in love and just infatuated and just focused on another person rather than yourself for your whole life. You may have been like a caretaker, taking care of someone else. This also has like academic implications because you could have been someone who was like an observer, someone who was measuring things and completely just focusing on, like observing something rather than participating, rather than acting or initiating. Does that make sense? So a life built on, or maybe multiple lives built on observation, selflessness, there wasn't really a strong individuality in these past lives. It was, you had to focus on other people. So coming into this life, we really see this especially strong, in the childhood years, because we kind of carry over this energy into our current life. So South Node in Libra, this typically would be a kid that is very observant, a little bit passive, definitely like a good kid, so to speak, because they are generally pretty obedient. They're an easygoing kid, someone who is very observant. And combining this with IC and Gemini, which is another placement that says a lot about our childhood, both indicate a child that was easygoing, very intellectual, very observant, very much interested in people. So may have been a bit of a people watcher. Could also be very crafty, like maybe having some artistic skills or interested in activities that were passive in nature. So, reading, writing, drawing, creating something out of like blocks, or, making something with your hands. All of these would be really common for these placements. And what I find interesting is sometimes, like with charts like these, they suggest a childhood personality that was very different than the personality later in life. So, later in life, there's this really outgoing, confident personality suggested by this chart. But in childhood, it looks like there may have actually been some shyness and a lot of kind of detachment. With Gemini IC, this suggests it suggests a child that may have been alone a lot and had a vivid imagination. So likely would have, talked to themselves or talked to imaginary friends. All of that's very common with IC in Gemini. So really a, very smart kid, very kind of passive, observant, may have been viewed as strange by your peers, but you'd also be, very intelligent for sure, very adaptable. Kind of like a wallflower is what I'm saying, which again to me is so interesting because later in life could almost not be more different. Later in life you'd not be a wallflower whatsoever. You'd be, very active. You'd be the initiator and the instigator. So, kind of interesting how things can change for sure. Let's see. Other than that, Saturn is in Aries, so I just talked about this recently in a reading, but okay, so for this placement, it's a subgenerational placement. So basically anyone born, up to a year before or a year after you would have this placement. So what I'm about to say kind of applies to your subgeneration. Okay, so Saturn represents our challenges. It's always a challenging energy for us, especially early in life. Wherever it is in our charts, it tends to get easier as time goes on. For you though, with Saturn in Aries, this is a particularly challenging placement because Saturn is in detriment, or excuse me, it's in fall in Aries. It's debilitated. So the reason why this is so difficult is because, like I mentioned, for Saturn, it represents something that's initially very challenging for us, that we have to kind of work through. We have to climb this mountain, so to speak, and by rising through these trials and tribulations on our own with no help, that's how we become a master. And there's really valuable experience that comes from these challenges. Okay, the reason why this is difficult is because Saturn is in Aries. Aries has to do with the self-expression, self-confidence. What else? Being a leader, being an initiator. So what I find is that, young people who have Saturn in Aries often struggle with depression or other mental health issues. A lot of this stems from their very high standards that they put on themselves. They, feel like they're a loser because they feel like they can't live up to their own expectations. So this is very challenging. What could be more challenging than, putting this heavy burden on your own ability to lead, ability to kind of do anything, ability to express yourself. So this is very difficult, often is very dark early on. But like I said, this gets easier with time, or maybe to put it more accurately, we get better at it. So even, by your late 20s is your Saturn return. So typically there's an experience with increased responsibility that we have to, do something on our own. And we have to kind of grow up and think about the long term. So usually we grow up a lot in our late 20s. And then in our 30s, we tend to be much better at, whatever Saturn was pushing us to do. So for you, by the time you were, going through your 30s and whatnot, you may have had an easier time with this. And this is part of what I find so interesting about this chart is that you present the image of being very confident all the time, of being consistently confident, never having, a doubt in your mind about anything. But the reality is, this chart to me looks like a person who has struggled with self-confidence. And if anything, that confidence that you show is something that you had to work for. It's something that you had to cultivate within yourself. It's something that wasn't always there, if that makes sense. So I do find that kind of admirable and very interesting. Okay, and I think that kind of fits in with growing up as well. It fits in with these other placements in your chart, which suggest someone who maybe was kind of timid or withdrawn early in life, and someone who, throughout the years became more outgoing, became more gregarious, So as innate as these things might seem, I would speculate that they're not innate. But yeah, the chart definitely points to being much more confident, much more of a leader, a little bit later in life. This is strengthened by Midheaven and Venus in Sagittarius as well, as well as many other placements too. North Node is in Aries. Okay, I almost forgot to talk about that. So back to the nodes. So South Node in Libra, starting out life and coming from past lives, focusing on other people, not really having a voice, not having a strong purpose or strong passion. You'd be kind of like drifting, mentally speaking, and just only observing. And there can definitely be a lot of value in that for sure. It looks like a very peaceful personality, and it looks like a personality where you can absorb a lot very quickly. So you could learn very well, and that goes back again to the strong potential for thriving with academics and stuff like that. But what North Node in Aries is suggesting and showing is that one of your probably maybe even the largest challenge in this life is that self-expression, that self-confidence, and having a strong sense of self in general, the individuality. That's because not only is North Node in Aries, but so is Saturn. Both of them are in Aries. Again, Aries themes are self-expression, identity, having a purpose, having passion, knowing what you want, and having that kind of life energy, that fire, so to speak. So whenever we have North Node and Saturn in the same sign, that is pretty rare, and it is extra challenging. But you do have these other placements which suggest that you are a naturally confident person. Even if it takes time to kind of develop, it does look like a strong potential, I think. In other words, like Scorpio Sun, Leo Moon, Sagittarius, Midheaven, and Venus, these are confident placements. So basically, there are some placements suggesting that you really struggle with individuality and self-confidence, self-expression, especially early in life. And there's other placements that suggest that, it's really not a hard thing for you. So that's where I think, both can be true. Yes, you may be a confident, outgoing person, but this may have not always been the case, and it may not always be the case. Just because you seem confident all the time doesn't mean you are. You feel like you owe it to other people to present this strong image all the time. But yeah, North Node in Aries says, do what you want, blaze your own trail, forge your own path. I don't know, something like that. Do your own thing. What do you want? What do you think? Forget what other people think. Of course, it's about balance. Wherever our South Node is, there's a lot of strength that is there. That's innate. It's something that we're born with. So, you may be an excellent observer. You're excellent at anticipating others' needs. But North Node in Aries is saying, take care of yourself too. Speak your truth, so to speak. Do what's right for yourself. You know what I mean? Because that's actually necessary to have healthy relationships with other people. Okay, I think we actually kind of covered most of what I want to say. Let's talk a little bit more about the upbringing, because there are a couple more things I can talk about there. So to see what the home environment was like growing up, we can look at the angle the sun and the moon make to one another. And when you were born, the moon was in its third quarter phase, roughly speaking. Looks like about maybe a day and a half before an exact third quarter moon. So, okay. So this in itself means that, this is a very philosophical dynamic. This is a crisis in consciousness. So this means that you're kind of always in a perpetual state of a crisis in consciousness. This may be challenging, but it allows you to constantly be open to new ideas and self-improvement. You're always changing. That's something interesting about this chart too. You're a person that's very much consistent. You want consistency. You are a very consistent person, but at the same time, it's almost like you're consistent in how you are perpetually changing and adapting and evolving. Both are true at the same time for you. Okay, but with Sun and the Moon squaring, they're in two very different signs here. So this suggests that your parents, if you grew up with both parents, they were likely very different, had very different personalities. They had different parenting styles with you. There was a lot of contrast in your home growing up. Even if you grew up with one parent, they may have had a lot of contrast within themselves and acted different ways at different times with you. So, excuse me, this is very difficult and confusing for a child to grow up with that energy. But it is advantageous in the long run, because this allows you to have two different perspectives in your mind at the same time. So this is really great for understanding complex concepts. It's also great for having empathy with other people. So you would find it pretty easy to empathize with someone who's experiencing something you may never have experienced. And it's because of growing up in an environment where conflicting narratives were kind of projected on you at the same time. So that's something that you've had to reconcile with. And ultimately, that's kind of what creates this almost like schism in your personality, these two very different sides of yourself. You may find it difficult to be satisfied. And, yes, that's maybe unfortunate, but this is also what allows you to be so ambitious. Because, you're restless, you're slightly agitated all the time. You feel that you have to keep moving and keep working and fixing things. So, yes, that may be unfortunate if you cannot appreciate, the fruits of your labor, but it can also be advantageous if, this is your motivation. This is what drives you to some extent. So, okay. And it looks like your father, well, for the most part, sometimes these things are hard to predict in astrology, but for the most part, I'm seeing that your father would be very present in your life growing up. I say this because Sun is roughly trining the ascendant. Also, Sun is at the top of the chart. Sun often represents the father. Saturn is retrograde, which can represent an absent father, but for the most part, it looks like your father would be very present in your life. For the mother, it's harder for me to say either way. The moon's not really making an exact aspect with the rising. That's a little bit more modal. It looks like you may have been closer to your father, I think. Of course, I'm just speculating on the placements. Okay, I think we kind of covered, the past and challenges and things like that. The main challenge by far is with that self-image and that confidence. What else can I say? Oh, I guess in case I didn't already make it very clear, though, later in life, although this does look particularly challenging, more challenging than what most people have to deal with, it does look like a really great setup for having an excellent self-image and self-expression, self-confidence later in life. It's just going to take time for you. These are things that you have to work for. Other people may be born just confident, and this is something they have. For you, it's just not going to work like that. It's something that you will eventually cultivate. And this largely is up to free will. Not all of us choose to work through these challenges, but like I've kind of touched on, you have these other placements which suggest that you are, vigilant, you're ambitious, you're wanting change, you're wanting, self-improvement and evolution. So I would speculate that you would very much rise up to this challenge and, realize this potential of being, of having a very strong voice, having, strong reputation later in life, especially after age 30 and then even more so later on. Okay, so let's talk about professionally. What kind of job would you need or thrive with? And also the reputation as well, since these two are kind of linked. So for these things, we look mostly to the midheaven. In this case, midheaven is in Sagittarius. So this shows that although you may have been somewhat shy or inhibited early on, it was this vivid imagination and this almost kind of like chatty energy that you had as a child that eventually creates this really strong reputation of being very entertaining. At work and in public, you would be kind of like Sagittarius. So you would be outgoing, very jovial, maybe very funny, humorous, charismatic, very much a personality, very much a strong personality. That's something that comes, through many of the placements that you have. And with Sagittarius midheaven, this is a very versatile sign, so you can do many different things with this, but the one common thread is that really strong personality. And Sagittarius wants expansion. So wherever your career is or your public image, you'd always be expanding and changing. You'd be very open to new experiences through work or through your public life in general. So traveling for work is, very likely. You probably would travel very far for work, at least, for part of your life. Venus is also conjunct the midheaven. So, again, that shows that really prominent reputation. Others adore you at work. Others love your company. And, this is just probably the best placement or one of the best placements for having a really strong reputation. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but that strong reputation, translates to, you may do very well financially in this life as well, having these placements. Okay, yeah, and we already talked about, really strong personality. But there's that academic side as well that I don't think other people may always realize, that you can be an observer, you can be intellectual. I don't think that's the way you normally come across. You come across as someone more, feeling, more passionate and charismatic. All those things are true, but you also have that intellectual side as well. So it's hard. I don't know. Some charts, it's harder for me to say than others what you would do for your career. But whatever it is, it's something where you're a leader for sure. something where you have a prominent reputation. So you'd be an excellent spokesperson or like a salesman, someone who has to be persuasive, and speak with conviction. What I'm really thinking is you'd be an excellent person to give like a speech or something, like a leader of a country or something. I know that's kind of silly, but you have that strong charisma. You come across very confident, and I don't think you would be too overbearing though, because you have the Pisces rising to kind of mellow things out a little bit and to be appealing to people of all walks of life. So you are very confident. You speak with such really strong conviction, but you're not too overbearing. You're kind of in this happy medium. And then that Venus conjunctive in Sagittarius is there to kind of broadcast, those charismatic traits that you have. So I don't know, something maybe involving travel, something involving working with people of many different backgrounds, so people from many different parts of the world, or maybe people who have different beliefs, different ways of living. You would thrive with any of that. What else can I say? Working with people of different backgrounds, something where you have a strong presence for sure. Like, I would hate to take a person with a chart like this and then put them in some back room somewhere where they're like filing filing shelves somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, this is a chart that needs to be put out in the open, that needs to be given a microphone type of thing. So exactly what that is, it's hard for me to say. I think you'd be excellent with many different fields. But something, working with the public, working with people of different backgrounds, maybe something involving traveling. That main thing is that personality, though. That's gold, I think, for sure. Okay, let's talk about relationships. So, what kind of person would you be attracted to? And what would the ideal relationship look like for you, as best as I can put it, in my opinion, from your placement. So for these types of things, we look mostly to Venus, Mars, and the descendant. Let's talk about Mars first, because, so Mars represents more of the sexual part of desire and attraction. It's how we approach, sex, among other things. And Mars along with Venus represents what kind of person we're attracted to. So for you, Mars is in Libra, so this means that you may actually have more of like a kind of, this is where it gets a little bit contradictory, because Mars in Libra suggests a low sex drive, but then Sun in Scorpio and Moon in Leo suggest a high sex drive. So but you may be a little bit more easygoing sexually than you come across. You come across as someone that would be really like dominant and excessive or intense, but Mars in Libra says you're actually pretty easygoing, a little bit passive. Anyway, not to get too deep into that, but Mars in Libra suggests you may be attracted to someone who has Libra placements, or someone who embodies Libra-like themes. So someone who's more easygoing, passive, go with the flow, someone more intellectual. That's actually where you would have the best kind of chemistry in that aspect. Venus is in Sagittarius, which also shows attraction. I would say even more so than Mars. And Venus also has to do with our approach to relationships. So Venus being in Sagittarius means that you're attracted to someone kind of fiery. So this is almost, very different than what Mars suggests. Venus in Sagittarius says you would literally be attracted to people who have strong Sagittarius placements, or people who embody those themes. So people who are outgoing, adventurous, charismatic, very, like someone who has a very strong personality, someone who's very humorous and always having a good time, having a laugh, having fun, going on another adventure, having another experience. And this shows too that, adventure and new experiences are, I think they're a primary part of attraction for all of us, but especially for you. This is a really big deal. This is what you want in a relationship. And I think this is going to be necessary to have, for a functional relationship for you, for a happy relationship. You're going to want someone you can go on adventures with. So Sagittarius would be great for that. We love whatever sign we have our Venus in. So that could literally be people with strong Sagittarius placements. It could also be someone with fire placements in general. You have Leo moon. Leo's another fire sign. So someone with strong Leo energy, it's going to be similar enough to what you're attracted to, but it's also going to resonate with what you are deep down because that's where your moon is. So there'd be really deep understanding there, deep connection. So far, the signs that stand out to me the most are Sagittarius and Leo. Aries is another fire sign. There could also be attraction there, because they are similar to, these other things I've explained. Like, Aries is similar enough that you would have the deep connection there, and the attraction, but you have your Saturn in Aries, so as well as your North Node. So people with Aries placements will be kind of teachers for you, or even if they're not instructing you necessarily, they will be, just by being themselves around you, they like lessons will come to you from them. So that can be very valuable, but it's not fun. It's not sexy. You know what I mean? It's not, I don't think it's usually something that we can always engage with in a long-term relationship because, Aries for you represents perpetual challenges and growth. Of course we want to challenge ourselves. We want to grow, but having that come to us through a romantic relationship, I think can be kind of difficult and not always wanted. So mostly Sagittarius and Leo really stand out to me. You're going to want someone with that fire, that enthusiasm, that spontaneity. That's going to be really attractive for you. Someone with a strong personality, kind of like yours. Okay, but the one placement I look to more than any for especially long-term compatibility is the descendant. The reason why is because on the other side, we have the ascendant. So that's your self-image. That's how you approach things. That's who you are in the relationship. Your descendant is opposite that. So that's the kind of person you attract. And that's the kind of person that you'd have the best partnership with. That's the most natural. And that applies to, any kind of partnership, not just romantic. But having Pisces rising, this means that you are the spontaneous one in the relationship. You're the one that adds the zest, you know what I mean? The creativity, you're the one that keeps it fun and interesting. The kind of person that you'd be attracted to, I would say, is kind of more like a rock, like someone who keeps you grounded, someone who's there to, figure everything out and kind of be the more responsible one, someone who's maybe keeping track of like finances or planning things. And this is something I often see in charts. This is how it usually is. People are either the rock, they're, the grounded one, or they're the one that's spontaneous and keeping things lively, let's just say. So that's kind of how I see it working for you. You're the creative one, you're the imaginative one, you're the more like artistic one, so to speak. You're gonna want a partner kind of like Virgo. Practical, down to earth, grounded, kind of humble, modest. Virgo would also work with your sun. Virgo is very compatible with Scorpio placements. So, this kind of modesty and humility may be very attractive to you. And I think, having someone with strong placements on our descendant, that to me I would look to more than anything else for potential with long-term compatibility. So definitely Virgo. Could also be the other earth signs as well, Capricorn or Taurus. Any of these three would be grounded, practical, down to earth, responsible. They're gonna check that box, so to speak. Taurus I think would be more attractive to you than Capricorn would, because Taurus opposes your sun, so it could be an opposite attract thing. Scorpio people can be attracted to Taurus because they are so grounded. They're, maybe even more consistent and steady than Capricorn or Virgo, which are also consistent and steady. But Taurus is fixed, so there's that consistency, that, steadfast energy. They are so chill, so, so reliable. So Scorpio people can be drawn to them because they feel safe around them. They feel that, they can rely on them. They're very loyal, again, which is something we touched on. So I think Taurus would be interesting because it does square and oppose your sun and moon. So in other words, someone with strong Taurus energy is going to butt heads with you. I think you would disagree a lot, but you would understand each other and respect each other because you'd both be strong-willed personalities. Does that make sense? So I think that would be a really interesting placement for you. It would be, you'd have enough in common to speak the same language and understand each other, but the differences there I think would actually make it more kind of lively and fun for you. Capricorn could work too. I'm not like in love with that sign for you. Virgo, I see more potential with because it's kind of mutable and intellectual, like your Sagittarius Venus. It's you do have a side of you that's very ambitious and always working on self improvement, and all of that you'd find a lot in common with Virgo too. So the main signs I see you attracted to or having a potential relationship with would be Leo, Sagittarius, Virgo, and Taurus. Also, on a more general level, the astrological elements of fire and earth will be the most important for you. I think these are what you need in a partner, generally speaking. But let's go through the other elements too. So for air placements, you really have almost no air placements at all. You do have the South Node in Libra, which we talked about. Oh, and I guess there are a couple more. So there's Uranus and Mars in Libra too, but still really not a lot of air energy. So I always say in my readings, this can go one of two ways, and it probably will go both these ways at different times in your life. So when we generally lack an element, we can be repulsed by it because it's something that's just too different from us. So in this case, air signs are going to be, they're all up in the air. They're very detached. They're very cerebral. You generally are not like that. You are invested in things. You're passionate. You feel things very strongly. So for you, I don't think you can tolerate a lot of this like detachedness and not wanting to commit to anything, wanting to just float around. I think that would irritate you, to be totally honest. However, the other way this could go would be, it can be interesting. I think especially when we're younger, it can be very interesting to be around people that have an element that we lack, because it almost seems like they have a superpower. They have an ability that we don't, and vice versa. You would have abilities that they do not. So in this case, air signs, people with air energy, Libra, Aquarius, or Gemini, they're going to show you, you don't have to take everything so seriously. You can kind of, take things with a grain of salt sometimes, and just learn from things and observe. But like I said, I don't see you really enjoying that, because this is, we talked about your childhood. It looks like you were more that way early on, but I don't think this is something that will be rewarding for you in this life. This isn't something, it's not the direction that you're meant to go. You're meant to go more in the fire direction, generally speaking. I say that, of course, acknowledging free will, you can do whatever you want, but Saturn and North Node and Aries and Midheaven and Sagittarius as well, these are all indicating that you're meant to go on a more, let's take things seriously. Let's be passionate. Let's do something, rather than like, oh, let's just observe and kind of float around. You know what I mean? So Libra, Aquarius, Gemini, I don't see a lot of compatibility there. If anything, I think people with Libra placements, you may have some kind of sexual chemistry since your Mars is there. And, you also have your South Node there. So people with Libra energies, you're going to understand very well, because in a way you kind of come from that energy. So you may have kind of a deep connection with people of that sign. But Aquarius and Gemini, especially Gemini, I see the least compatibility with. They are the flakiest, so to speak. They're the most, spontaneous. Like, they're over here, they're over there, they're always changing. I think that would be just confusing and irritating for you. You're looking for consistency, and Gemini is probably the least consistent sign. I think that one I'd be probably most opposed to than any other sign. But of course, it could work if there are the right other placements, but it would be a stretch, I think. Aquarius, I could maybe see you having some kind of relationship with, the detachment, I think kind of goes against this and would be irritating for you. But it is a fixed sign. So again, it would be a dynamic kind of like Taurus, where they're a very strong-willed personality. They are who they are, and they're not going to change that. And you are like that in a way too, since you have fixed signs in your chart. So although you're not going to really agree a lot with someone who has strong Aquarius energy, you can at least agree to disagree. You can understand each other. You can speak the same language. So, I more see that as a friendship thing, though, rather than a romantic connection. I don't think that's something that you're really seeking necessarily. So air signs, probably the maybe least amount of compatibility. And then lastly, talking about the water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. The compatibility here, I think, is a little bit muddled or mixed. You do have Sun in Scorpio and Pisces rising. So these to me suggest that when you're around other people who have water placements like yours, you will relate a lot. It's going to be really easy to speak the same language and understand each other. And, it's going to be an easy dynamic. It's not going to be necessarily very interesting. It's more just going to be useful when you need like a shoulder to cry on, so to speak. Someone to, if you need someone just easy to be around, then, water signs could definitely do it. But there's not going to be that opposites attract there. And I always compare it to if you are two of the same sides of different magnets. Like if you're both a negative part of a magnet, you're gonna have a lot in common, but there's not gonna be that opposites attract there. So mostly friendship. I say that though, friendship could be part of something more. For instance, if someone had a lot of water placements but then also some fire there, then I could see an attraction and a friendship. But strong water energy on its own, though, I mostly just see as a friendship energy for you, friend zone, so to speak. Especially Scorpio and Pisces, since that's where you have your placements. So more friendship level with those energies. Cancer, I see less compatibility with. You have no planets there. They're going to be more emotional and more. They're going to be less consistent, kind of. And I think consistency is something that you're really looking for. So I would say Leo, maybe Sagittarius, Virgo, Taurus. Mostly those, for sure. Okay. But at this part of the reading, I kind of just look around to make sure I haven't, skipped over anything, or kind of have this opportunity to go back to cover anything I haven't yet. Oh, I should talk about, since we're kind of still on the topic of relationships too, your seventh house is packed. Pluto, Jupiter, Mars, and Uranus all in the seventh house. These point to some very intense experiences through relationships throughout your life. I wouldn't go as far as to say that relationships will always be intense for you, like every day of your life, but I do think you're going to have some really intense relationships. Like, I'm not talking about just normal crazy ex type of stuff, but really heavy, intense experiences through relationships. Jupiter is there, so that shows a lot of expansion, a lot of fun for sure, a lot of good experiences. But Pluto, Mars, and Uranus point to a lot of volatility and maybe some kind of like heavy accidents, or I definitely don't want to wish these things to be true, and hopefully I'm wrong, but it looks, if you had the right transit to kind of trigger these things, it could be very heavy, very intense, very physical in nature. I'm almost thinking like a death or like a violent accident or something. But again, hopefully I'm wrong and none of that's true. But yeah, very interesting though. In general, like a lot of really interesting relationships or interesting experiences through relationships because of all those planets there. One thing I mentioned too is that you do have a lot of detriment or fall placements in general. So that, that would be Saturn and Aries. I guess Sun and Scorpio I think of as almost in detriment, but I guess technically it's not. What else? Mars and Libra, and Jupiter and Virgo as well. And that leads me to something, your chart ruler is Jupiter and Virgo, and it is in detriment. So I think this shows that although you may come across as someone that, has everything figured out, is very confident, is very well accepted by others, and judging by your chart, you look like someone that's very much embraced by your community, by your family, someone who is celebrated. I think from the outside, this may look really easy. It may look like you are privileged, but I don't think that's the case at all. I think that your success is something that you've had to work very hard for. And if anything, everything comes back to the chart ruler, which is in detriment. So this shows that you are a person that is fundamentally kind of on the outside, or, relates to the underdog, so to speak. Someone who, has had to work very hard for what they have, I guess. And, detriment placements are generally more difficult. So having all these shows, a generally more difficult life, but these things make you stronger as well. And I find that people with many detriment energies they're more free thinking, like they think for themselves more, and they have, more unique opinions. They have really rich viewpoints on things because they think for themselves. They're not so much part of like just going along with the mainstream, so to speak. Does that make sense? It's because they've had to think for themselves and work, for themselves, so to speak. Okay, so that's what I have for your reading. Really interesting chart. It looks like an interesting and fun personality for sure. But yeah, thanks for this opportunity to read your chart, and I hope you have an excellent day. And let me know, as always, if you have any questions. I say at the end of every reading, if you have any questions at all, I'm more than happy to go back over something, or whatever it takes, I guess. Or if I said anything that was unclear, I'm more than happy to clarify. And any feedback you have as well, I'm always open to. Okay, but thanks for this opportunity, and I'll talk to you later.